Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for being here today. My name is Ashley DeAzevedo. I'm the executive director here at American Families United, and I want to thank you all for joining this really important briefing. Before we begin, just a quick note, today's session is being recorded and we'll be sharing the findings and materials publicly in the coming weeks. If you have any questions or at any point feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll address as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end. Today, we are here to discuss a population that is far too often overlooked in the national conversation on immigration. U.S. citizens who are married to and in many cases raising American children with an undocumented spouse. Right now, approximately 1.2 million U.S. citizens are living inside the United States in a mixed status marriage, and as many as 300,000 more are already separated from their spouse or living abroad because our current laws give them no path to remain together here at home. These are families who pay taxes, who contribute to their communities, who do everything that is asked of them, while living every single day with the fear that the person they love most could be taken away. And yet, despite their numbers, they remain one of the most underserved and least understood groups in our entire policy landscape. That's why today's conversation is so important. This fall, AFU conducted its first in-depth survey of mixed status couples across the country. For years, we have known the personal toll this crisis takes, the emotional strain, the economic consequences, the medical challenges, and the lifelong instability. But until now, the data to actually document that reality simply didn't exist. AFU has become the national hub for these families, a place where impacted U.S. citizens can finally tell their truth about what they're living through, and a place where policymakers, the press, and the public can learn directly from those who are affected. Today's briefing is the first look at what we have found. I'm honored to be joined by three incredible people who make this work possible. First, Dr. Austin Kocher, a leading researcher whose expertise has helped to turn lived experience into meaningful data. Second, Amanda, a U.S. citizen and AFU member whose family story represents the reality that so many are living with and whose courage helps make visible what too often remains hidden. And finally, Allyson Batista, AFU's program director, who leads our work on the ground every day to support families and strengthen our member-led organizing nationwide. Thank you all for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Austin to walk us through how this data was collected and what it tells us. Austin, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Ashley. I'm really honored to be here with the AFU family and everyone who decided to join today. This survey is really important, as Ashley said, because mixed status families are not a part of the immigration system that's very well studied. The US government does not keep very good data, if any systematic data at all, on mixed status couples. So this is not something that we can just get data from the government about, like we can ICE arrest, detention, and deportation. We have to do this work independent of the government, and that's why AFU has taken the lead on this. The survey that we designed and distributed this fall was specifically designed for mixed status couples. All of the respondents in this study are United States citizens, all U.S. citizens who are married to non-citizen spouses who either are or could be facing deportation. We received a total of 240 responses, largely within AFU's a vast membership pool, but also from other mixed status couples within AFU's broader national network. Your comments and questions today will help shape next steps in this research and in publication. So please do post questions and comments in the chat, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. We'll release a full report very shortly. You are getting the very first look at this data. And just one more thing before we get into the data. This is really just the very first look at a real survey. There's a lot more that we could do with this, and so AFU does have ambitions of expanding this, both in terms of its reach and participants, as well as the robustness of the data in the tool. So with that, let's have a look at the initial findings. We understand very little until this survey about U.S. citizens and mixed status relationships. So let's start with an overview. The most important question for the survey, as we learned through trial and some preliminary research, is understanding who in a mixed status couple actually still lives in the United States. One of the realities of our current immigration system and enforcement practices is that we can't assume that everyone who is in a mixed status relationship even lives in the country. And people's experiences, if they live outside of the country, are very different than those where the U.S. citizen and their spouse both live in the United States. And it's also different for those where the U.S. citizen may still live in the United States and the spouse has either chosen to or been forced to move abroad. Currently, about 80% of the 80% of the survey respondents, both the citizen and the spouse, still lives in the country. But we do have a significant number, almost 20% of the survey respondents are experience either separation or exile. So we refer to U.S. citizens forced to live abroad with their spouse as U.S. citizens living in exile, and about 11% are currently living separated by the immigration system. That will come into play as we go throughout the survey because we do have a variety of questions, some of which only apply to people still living together and facing separation, as opposed to those who are living abroad. We'll come back to that final group at the end. Holistically speaking, we notice some general trends and characteristics of mixed status couples, at least those that respond to the survey. Most are female U.S. citizens, while a minority are male. We would love to do more research to flesh that out with a larger group, but that is many of the stories and many of the people represented here are women married to married to immigrant men. About half of the respondents are white in the United States. The other half are biracial or other racial minorities, including Hispanic or Latino, Black, African American, and a number of people reported indigenous identities as well. In terms of the age of respondents, this is not a predominantly, young, most people are not in their 20s. Majority of folks are in their 40s. So about a little over 40% are in their 40s. I would say the vast majority of respondents are between 30 and 60, with some respondents being older in their 60s and 70s as well. So it really spans a tremendous diversity of age. We received responses from constituents, mixed status constituents from almost every state in the entire country. Texas, Florida, and California are represented the largest, Illinois as well because of Chicago. That's not that surprising. These are states that have large numbers of undocumented populations and just have large numbers of populations in general. We haven't adjusted this for population density or anything like that, but we just wanted to show that we do have a large number of respondents in California and Texas, but really a lot of states represented here. One of the most important findings is just how long and durable the marriages are for mixed status couples in the United States right now. We find that on average across all participants on average mixed status couples have been married for over 13 years, which is quite substantial given the fact that that many marriages in the United States do not make it past 8 years. So these are couples who have durable marriages that are surviving despite all of the pressures around them. 76% of mixed status couples have been married for 10 years or more, which is, again, quite a long time for 3/4 of that group. And 20% of respondents have been married for 20 years or more. So again, these are not, largely speaking, brand new relationships. These are people who've been together for a long time. Specifically looking at U.S. citizen spouses, most spouses have been in the country for a long time. Again, these are not spouses who are, by and large, recent arrivals. There are some, but they're largely not recent arrivals. The earliest that some of the spouses of U.S. citizens in the data came to the United States was in the 80s, So some people have been here, since the 80s, came to the United States first in the 80s. A majority came in the 90s and the 2000s. So over 90% of spouses of U.S. citizens we find have lived in the country for at least 15 years, and 40%, just under half, have called the United States their home for 25 years or more. So these are people who have been in the country for a long time. And one thing to note about why this is so important, poll after poll shows that U.S. citizens across the political spectrum believe that people who have been in the country for a long time are more deserving of pathways to lawful status, and that spans across party lines and across ideological lines. Many Americans don't understand that simply being in the country for a long time and not having a criminal record does not automatically open one up to a pathway to legal status or to citizenship in any way. So this is important data for thinking about maybe how some of those policies might be adjusted by Congress to fit Americans' expectations. So spouses have been in the country a long time. Couples have been married a long time. This is, again, just first look at these numbers. And of the mixed status couples that we surveyed, 75% have at least one biological child together. Over half have more than one. So these are, again, these are relationships, these are marriages and families that are growing. People are having kids, and at this point, if you just think back to the length of the marriages and the length that people have been in the country, when we say number of children, these are not all minors. Many of these children, were born and grew up their entire childhood and have maybe left the home at this point. And that entire time, one of their parents has not had a pathway to legal status. And so many of these children listed here may be adults actually at this point. Now, one of the things that we know, or I would say that AFU knows, because American Families United and Ashley and Allyson have been doing this work for a long time, the work that immigrant spouses do in U.S. citizen families is much more than just extends far beyond biological children. These are spouses, husbands, wives who are supporting children from another relationship, who are supporting aging parents who may have moved back in for end of life care or hospice care. They may foster children and be providing support to U.S. citizens, children in the foster system. There are all kinds of scenarios far beyond just whether or not the couple has their own children that helps to understand the tremendous value and role that these spouses play. So we gave respondents plenty of room to describe any other kinds of children or dependent relationships that immigrant spouses may be providing. So some of the feedback that we got, and this is just a very small sample, but we see in the first quote, a woman saying, "My undocumented spouse and I take their uncle to chemo at least once per month, and when the U.S. citizen spouse can't do it, their partner is doing this work of making sure that their uncle gets very serious medical treatment." The middle quote, we see that the spouse is helping to take care of a daughter who has a particular syndrome, which we've redacted just because it's so specific that it could be identifying in this case. So this is a 22-year-old daughter who is probably still living at home and requiring an enormous amount of care, and this spouse is providing a tremendous amount of care for this individual despite not having a pathway to legal status. And then the last quote we see here, again, with the end-of-life care and hospice, this a U.S. citizen's husband provided care during hospice, during the final months and years of her mother's life. So we can see that when we think about how families are impacted by the immigration system and how we should think about the more complex role that immigrant spouses play in American families, this gives us a little bit of a qualitative snapshot of that. So that gives us an overview of what mixed status families look like in the United States to give us some texture of who's affected. The next thing we want to look at is growing fears of family separation. So we were very interested not only in understanding a broad demographic portrait of mixed status couples, but also what they're really going through right now, given the policy landscape in the United States. One thing that we found that just stuck out enormously in the data was how much things have changed for mixed status couples in just the last 12 months. We have a couple ways of getting at this question in the survey. One is to just compare, the discussions that married couples are having right now. And I can tell you, having spoken to some families myself, and obviously Ashley and Allyson talk to these families on the phone, text message, every single day. So they know this better than anyone. That married couples are forced to have really difficult conversations right now about how to keep their families safe. Some of you on the call may have seen the stories of Julie Moreno or Jenny Rivera, both of whom are active in AFU and have had their stories told because both of their spouses and their family decided together that their spouses would leave the country rather than face indefinite detention, rather than face the concerns about what kinds of violations and rights violations might happen inside of detention centers, how long that would take, and frankly, in this current environment, whether those individuals would even be sent back to the correct country. So this is forcing a lot of couples to have tough conversations. That's sort of the nature of self-deportation right now and the discussions that people are having. What we find is that prior to January, a better than half of couples had not really discussed one or both of them leaving the United States. But since the start of this year, that number has grown from 45% all the way up to a little over 80%. What that means is that, as I said, families are really couples are really having to have very difficult conversations. And it's not just about what they want to do, it's also about what they can do. If they have children, if they have other financial obligations, as you'll see, there's real consequences. 98% said that they were much more afraid and concerned about immigration enforcement compared to this time last year. So we are seeing the effects, obviously, of everything happening in the country. It is showing up in the data on mixed status couples. To get to the question more precisely, we asked just very bluntly, is your spouse currently, at the time of the survey, actively planning to leave the United States? 7% said yes, not an insignificant number, given that we did have 240 respondents. So it is quite significant. Although I will also say that the survey taken in its totality, families really do try first and foremost to stay together. So 75% are not planning on separating or leaving the country. Most people want to stay with their family, and most people want to stay in the country that they love. That's the simple takeaway. I would say that something very interesting emerged from the data as well. As much as we try to have a survey that captures a variety of experiences, reality is always more complicated than multiple choice options. And one of the things that we found from comment boxes and when we gave people a chance to put their own words into the survey, what we found is that it's a lot more complicated than a simple yes/no question. There's a lot of dependencies. Some people may have a pathway to legal status and they may be waiting on paperwork to get adjudicated, to get processed. Others may be hoping for a long shot. And others, even if they don't have an option, may still be thinking about how they can stay together or what options are even available to them. Thank you for the questions in the chat. I'll just pause to say, please do add questions in the chat and we will absolutely come to those during the Q&A. So thank you very much. A majority of U.S. citizens 54% said that if their spouse left the country, they would be likely or very likely to leave as well. So that's and we find that this is a very difficult choice, obviously. If your spouse is forced to leave or chooses to leave, you don't really, it's a lose-lose scenario. Either you have to leave the country with your spouse and live in exile. Most said that they would, which we think reflects the deep and lasting relationship and family bonds that these couples have. Whereas 46% they said that they either wouldn't or couldn't leave the United States with their spouse, which would mean that they would be forced to live separately. We also have data on citizens facing multiple hardships. This is, following on from, we started off looking at general demographics about mixed status couples. We looked at what the tough decisions that they're being forced to consider this year. And now we want to take a look at the kinds of hardships that they've already faced leading up to this point. We find that U.S. citizens face a variety of hardships. Of those surveyed, 97% said that they have experienced emotional hardship. We have a lot of qualitative data on this. And again, I will refer you to the more complete report when it comes out, or AFU with Ashley and Allyson to expand on this. And we'll come to Amanda in a second, who will also help us understand the reality of this. But the truth is, U.S. citizens are paying a very heavy price right now for our leaders' lack of responsiveness to what U.S. citizens need and who are impacted by the immigration system. So 97% say that they have experienced emotional hardship. We got some really heartbreaking stories about that. 78% have had financial hardship. That may be because a spouse has left, taking, essentially cutting household income in half. It could also be because the cost of attorneys. People who do not have a pathway to legal status may face barriers in the workplace, which effectively cuts short their earning potential. So U.S. citizens and their families are facing financial consequences. We also found just a tremendous number of really sad situations involving people who have severe medical issues and are having, a hard time either paying for those or getting adequate care, either because their spouse doesn't have a pathway to citizenship or they've been forced to leave. We included question, and that's also true for educational hardship as well. There can be limitations to people's educational attainment when they're also trying to navigate the immigration system. And we included a question about spiritual hardship as well, because for so many people within the AFU network, this isn't just a matter of policy. This is also a matter of faith. And faith is something that's very important to a large number of Americans. And so we wanted to make sure that we recognize that this is a matter of faith for people as well. Just to give some example of some of the the qualitative responses that we found a number of couples where the husband to the U.S. citizen spouse is a key source of comfort and recovery for someone who's been in a difficult relationship in the past. And very often that relationship was with a U.S. citizen. So in this case, we have spouses doing a tremendous amount of crucial, important emotional work. We received a number of reports of just how important immigrant spouses, husbands and wives are to entire families, providing stability. Many have gone into business together. There are a lot of obligations that couples share, of course, when you're married, especially when you're married for as long as these couples are. And so losing that means not just financial disruption or distance or trying to manage a long distance relationship. It could mean tremendous hardship in all kinds of areas. And to the point about the medical hardship, we also included a quote here from one of the respondents who talked about going through really struggling with severe breast cancer and having her husband be the main anchor and rock for the family. And if that person is gone, that just means that support system for that family is tremendously undermined. When it comes to thinking through hardships and really understanding hardships, there is no number or graph or chart that will ever capture anything close to what it's actually like to live through this hardship as a person, as a U.S. citizen. And so I'd like you to please listen and give your attention to Amanda as she shares what she's been through recently. Amanda.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me? Am I unmuted? Good morning.
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good.
I am new to Zoom. I apologize. So good morning. My name is Amanda Ribeiro, and I am a United States citizen and a proud member of the American Families United. Thank you for having me and hearing my story today. I'm here to share with you my story and how the current immigration policies impact my family. I was born and raised right here in Jacksonville, Florida, where I work and live as a public health nurse. It was here in my hometown that I met and married the love of my life, Wagner, in 2008. We dated for 6 years, I had to make sure, before we got married in 2014. That man loved me and still loves me fully and completely without judgment of my flaws and history with long-term child abuse and trauma. He nurtured my son from a previous marriage as his own and welcomed his role as a young father for a young boy who was abandoned by an American citizen. Wagner helped me heal from years of abuse and loved me in a way that everyone deserves to be loved at least once in a lifetime. He encouraged me to attend nursing school, cheered me on when I didn't think that I could do it, and even helped me pay back my student loans. Years of pain and shame disappeared as this man enveloped me into pure love of family and God. I knew Wagner's immigration history was going to be complicated, but like most Americans, I figured as a United States citizen, my own status of our marriage would be easy fix. I couldn't have been wrong. Soon after we married, we consulted with an immigration attorney who informed us that this would be a greater uphill battle more than I have ever imagined. Wagner would have to apply for a waiver. It's a type of forgiveness that the government grants, allowing him to continue his immigration journey. It was very lengthy and very expensive, but there was no choice. We had to move forward if we wanted to do things the right way. In 2014, we entered into the legal immigration process willingly and waited for a final decision on his case for over 10 years. Life happens in 10 years, guys. Only to be denied the relief that we were seeking by definition should have been qualified for, given our extreme and unusual hardships during this time his case was being considered. My husband was detained by ICE this year and held into detention for 3 months while his case was being adjudicated, and the final decision, that was a denial, was formally made by U.S.Citizens. He was subsequently deported to his home country in Brazil, June of 2025. Over the past 18 years, we have been together. We have been blessed with a beautiful family. Dr. Austin, thank you for letting me know I was in that minority of 2% of people with children more than 4. Thank you. We have a beautiful family, including our 8 children, 8 boys, 3 biological. So you know what that means? That we prayed for after 3 years of infertility. 1 for my previous marriage of abuse, and 4, my husband and I legally adopted from my sisters who turned into intravenous users and street workers after blaming childhood trauma. Our oldest was born with a serious medical issue, requiring a heart and liver transplant. At the tender age of 17, Levi passed away October last year. While we were seeking and praying he would survive until placed on a transplant list, we were placed in hospice because he was denied in May of 2024. We weren't paying attention to the news and the politics that was occurring in January. We were utterly devastated. At the same time, January after Levi passed away of this year, our oldest son, Samuel, biological son, was facing serious medical issues for which he required palliative care. He had to be placed on hospice, children's palliative care, after we just got one son off. In January, he had an acute onset of a 14-minute epileptic seizure. And upon that MRI, we found a cyst on his brain that was inoperable. He and one of our other sons also have developmental delays for which they receive special services, one being nonverbal autistic. As if we wasn't suffering enough, my mom died. And in March, I had a widowmaker heart attack at the age of 42 years old, where a stent had to be inserted to sustain my life. and in April, Wagner was detained by ICE. I genuinely believe my heart was so broken, both medically and metaphorically, that I simply gave out from so much grief. Surviving the death of a child, my mother's passing, she was also on hospice care. And if it wasn't for Wagner taking care of our children, I couldn't have been there with my mom. My other son's struggle and my husband's deportation has given me the strength to face anything. When Wagner was deported, I lost my everything. Our business, our income, our home, and the most importantly, family. Because all the other stuff can be replaced, right? It's material. I know that these were tests of faith, and as difficult as they were, I knew a decision was going to be made, and I had to choose family over everything. I needed to reunite with my husband, and the decision to move all of us to Brazil became an easy one. In July of this year, my youngest 4 children and I moved to Monte Grosso, Brazil, where my husband grew up at and was already living with family after being deported. Monte Grosso, I'm pretty sure it's purgatory, is a farming state. It borders Bolivia, and where there is significant drug trade, making it a dangerous place to live for Americans who are often perceived as having money, although I certainly had none. We were so happy to have our family back together, at least for the moment. It was an easy to overlook of all the hardships we would soon face. Brazil is a beautiful country. People are amazing and humble, and they welcomed us with open arms, and they cared for us as their own in a time when I felt so betrayed by my own country, who turned its back on me in my most challenging hours. However, as much as I wanted and tried to make life work for us there, it wasn't possible. I had a heart attack and a stent placed at 42. My Samuel has epileptic seizures and resulted in a finding of a cyst on his brain. We needed care back here. The Brazilian healthcare doesn't offer much in those states up north. Sorry. On a level of therapies that also my son requires, especially, we were surviving on only 2,000 reais a month. That's only equivalent to 368 American dollars for a family our size of 4 growing boys that eat a lot and 2 adults. I was rationing bread that cost 12 reais a loaf and praying that we would make it each week. Thank God for rice and beans, right? It's an easy dish to stretch. But given my medical history, I needed better nutrition options. I needed medical that was not accessible in Brazil to treat my heart condition and my son's epileptic seizures. Ultimately, even the doctors there told me if I wanted to live, I needed to come back to the United States. In addition to these obvious stressors, I knew it was a matter of time before our personal safety would be in jeopardy. My children and I were walking to the park when locals were screaming, "Americanas, Americanas." My husband tried to get them to be quiet, but they didn't know him. They had no respect for him. And he was basically an immigrant too. He hadn't been home in 21 years. As part of the efforts to support Wagner during his detention and ultimately deportation, our church, our community, the hospice team that we were a part of, got us money to buy a home and assets, which were incredibly generous and appreciated. But this meant we were the American newcomers who had enough money to buy property in a city that was increasingly being inundated with gang violence. And I was bringing our young boys to grow up there, which were also perceived as having wealth. I knew that this meant that we were being targeted for gang violence and that my sweet boys could be sought after as future gang members. There was also a 17-year-old who was killed on our street, decapitated by gang violence the week that we moved there. As much as I wanted to stay there, I grew increasingly aware that our reunion would only be temporary. And last month, we made the decision for me to return to the US with our boys so we could receive appropriate medical care and resources that just are not available to ensure our survival. Now I have to file bankruptcy because I'm coming back as a single woman with 4 children, 2 being special needs and no income, and I can no longer afford the bills that added up. Sorry. With taking in my sister's 4 children, and I'd do it over and over again, and the life circumstances before my husband's deportation. Now depending on Florida state government assistance and seeking work wherever I can, that will also help me take care and provide for my children and also pay for or attempt to pay for an immigration attorney to help me get my husband back home. I know in my heart that our story is not over by a long shot. Wagner and I will reunite with our children again, but I am struggling reasoning with the purpose behind this senseless induced suffering by a government because of political stance. I'm a person. I can't make sense of why my country, America, would want to separate my family. And I'm just one voice in many for any of that matter. Who wins with my broken family living an ocean apart, a continent apart? I have to return to the US as a burden on systems that people are ridiculed for, that I worked in for 18 years of my career being a public servant, for accessing in times of need, yet my reliance is such on systems would have been completely avoidable. We were not on any government assistance my husband provided for us and the children that we took in. It would have been completely avoidable if my husband had been allowed to stay with us here in the US. In fact, there's a bill in Congress that would fix this problem, allowing my husband to pursue his immigration process while keeping my family intact. I ask you today, everyone, to contact your representative asking them to support the American Families United Act, HR 2366. Thank you.
Amanda, thank you for sharing that and for being willing to be vulnerable with everyone, all of us in the room today.
Welcome.
As you can see, this is not an abstract question about what mixed status families are going through in the country. Amanda's story, put together with so many others, hundreds, thousands of others, are part of what we're trying to do with this project of combining lived experience with some data points that we can communicate to the public and to our leaders. So please keep that in mind as if you're in the room and you're writing about this, if you're a reporter, if you do public advocacy work, or if you're just a concerned citizen, please remember to keep all of this together and remember the very human voices that are behind this. Like Amanda says, there's human beings behind what's happening right now. We have just a few more data points to share with you coming from the hardships I think there's a perception in the American public that people who find themselves in these situations or in Amanda's, that it's simply because uh, someone hasn't gone to the right office or filed the correct piece of paperwork. We see this online, and we hear this in person. You know, if you've been married for 13 years and someone's been in the country for 15 years or 20 years, it's your fault. You haven't filled out the right paperwork. Well, that's just simply not true. There is no automatic legal pathway to someone just because they've been married or have been in the country a long time. In fact, what we find in the data is that U.S. citizens in mixed status relationships have done a lot. They've done everything that they could do to try to find a way forward, to do things the right way. They've met with attorneys, often, as Amanda said, at great personal expense of thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars. They've filed paperwork with agencies where they could file paperwork with. Many of them have met with elected officials. 90%, a vast majority of people have met with an attorney. Over 70% have filed paperwork with the government. More than a quarter have met with elected officials to try to get some sort of intervention. And slightly less than that, but about a quarter, have also filed paperwork with the immigration court system. That number is smaller just typically because there's fewer number of people who are even in the immigration court process to be able to do that. So mixed status couples have done a lot, and they've gone out of their way to try to become immigration experts themselves. Anyone in this room who studies immigration for a living will know how difficult and complex and nuanced this world is. And U.S. citizens are doing everything they can to learn so much about the system to try to do something. We had people in the survey say they've met with various attorneys over the course of their marriage, not just one, but multiple, and have been told that there is no pathway. Many U.S. citizens have spent thousands of dollars trying to pursue legal options, only to feel like it's not really about trying to do it the right way. This is just about politics, and politics is getting in the way of just supporting American families. And we've also heard from people in the survey who simply say, "Look, we've done everything that we can do. Now we've taken responsibility for what we can do. Now it's the responsibility of the government to show that it has some empathy for us as American citizens. Otherwise, we're going to remain stuck." The last slide that we have from the survey, and there's a lot more data coming out in the report, and we'll be sure to include all of the underlying tables of data. I mentioned at the very beginning that there are U.S. citizens, like Amanda was, at least for a little while, who are living abroad in exile, and as much like Amanda's experience, as much as couples want very much to stay together as a family, the truth is it's very difficult. In some cases, across the board, when it comes to medical hardship, emotional hardship, and financial hardship, everything is worse for U.S. citizens when they're forced to leave. For some people, some of those have gotten somewhat better, whether that's because they are no longer living in fear of detention and deportation. For some, it may be that some countries have better access to certain kinds of medical support, which can be a positive thing. But again, by and large, the majority says that the medical hardships have gotten worse. And we definitely see financial hardship much worse as well. 58% say that their financial hardship has gotten worse rather than better. The same is true for emotional hardship. So even trying to stay together as a family comes with all kinds of added complications and pressure. Separation from other family members, even if you're with a spouse, separation from your community. So this is an option that people are forced into. It's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. And now we have some data around that to really show that that is the case. That's the end of the data portion of the presentation. Again, like I said, we have more data that we'll share in the report. We are finalizing the report. We're going to finalize it partly based on the discussion, the questions and answers that we have today. So please post questions in the Q&A. If you can't find the Q&A, look in Zoom. There should be an option. We don't have an open chat because this is an open meeting, and we just wanted to have a little bit of quality control on that. But please do post questions in the Q&A. Sign up for emails from AFU. It will be sent out first through there. I would encourage you to follow American Families United and Ashley online. Ashley is at AFU Ashley. It's the same handle on Blue Sky, X, or Twitter, and Instagram. And if you are part of the press or if you have questions about this, please follow up at press@americanfamiliesunited.org. Ashley, do you have some closing thoughts for us? And we can head into Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Austin and Amanda. Again, thank you for being so courageous and raw with all of us. I know that that is not easy, and I know that this is all so new for you. So, again, big thank you. I want to encourage people to drop their questions in the chat. We have a few right now, and as they're loading, I will say this only gets better when all of us start paying attention, right? And sharing these stories and repeating them and, yeah, holding those accountable that can do something about it. It's not right that there are over 1 million Americans struggling like this every day. So I just really encourage everyone to keep your eyes on this situation, keep your eyes open. Sometimes it's easier to look away, but you can't. We need you all eyes wide open. So I'm going to go to the first question. And Austin, this might be something for you. Pedro's asking for if any of the data showed intersectionality with the LGBTQ community, spouses, and the impact SCOTUS and executive actions have against marriage equality.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question, Pedro. Since this was really our first survey, there were a number of things that we really wanted to ask, but were concerned about length of the survey. So we did not get into that question specifically. I think it is something that we can infer and imply from the data because we do have data in there about same-sex marriage, same-sex couples. But we don't have any more about identity, at least as self-reported. For the questions on all of the identity questions, gender and race, of course, we allowed people to self-identify in any way that made sense to them. We didn't get a statistically significant number of responses in that way, so we don't have anything that specifically touches on LGBTQ folks impacted by the intersection of attacks on marriage equality and mixed status couples. I definitely have my eyes on that, and I think that's something that as we build out the survey over time, we'll be able to add to it and flesh out some questions like that. So I'm sorry to say we don't have any good data on that yet, but we think based on what we'll have in the report, I think it'll be the basis for next steps. And certainly if there are other researchers and organizations who have suggestions for ways to partner with AFU to expand on some of those more specific questions, again, please reach out to us at Press.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Austin. And Pedro, I just want to highlight or amplify the fact that we do have a large representation of LGBTQ plus spouses within AFU. So it is certainly part of the advocacy work that we do, part of the education that we do. I don't have specific on the intersectionality of the SCOTUS and executive actions on marriage equality, but it is a great flag, and thank you for bringing that up. I think it's something that we should definitely dig into, Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at the other questions in the chat, or I'm sorry, the other comments, Amanda, just so you know, I don't know if you can see the Q&A, but a lot of praise for your bravery and persistence, and people saying that they will not forget you and Wagner and your family. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Amanda, there's another question. Could you explain a bit more about what steps you tried as a family for your husband to obtain his immigration status and what responses you were getting?
Oh, most definitely years of dedication to attorneys. We had a series of 4 different attorneys that we went to. We first had to apply for an I-130.
The one thing
Uh,
I just want to say is I don't want to get too specific into her case because this is still an ongoing legal process. So I'm
yeah,
going to caveat the answer, Amanda. So please just be very general in your
yeah.
response.
We had permission to proceed. My husband asked forgiveness, and we got permission to proceed with process. So, what I can speak of factually, we have an approved I-130, we have an approved I-212, and an approved pre-approval of a visa, right, that awaits for you. And we were awaiting for 3 years for the 601A when ultimately the month after he was detained was denied. So that was one of the final steps before you go back into your country and do the visa process and enter back. We were at the very end when we were denied to continue process here in the United States.
Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Um, okay. Any other questions before we wrap up? Give another minute. Again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Like we said earlier, this is the first of many, many conversations that will come out of this survey and the data that we're presenting. Um, Marta, thank you for sharing that. That is a lot of what happens with AFU families. Um, Sergio, that is a very diverse set of responses. Um, we did not ask for the survey why the spouse is inadmissible. We didn't get into the nitty gritty on that, right, Austin?
We have some data on that, but we left it fairly open ended. We are still discussing which parts of that to include in the report. But we'll be sure to touch on that and let you know exactly what we are and are not able to publish, or what we did and didn't collect on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda, Allison is asking what was Wagner's crime. I just want to clarify Wagner had no crime. He was detained by ICE simply for being here without legal status. There's a question. Thank you. May we find a way to heal? Thank you, Julio. That's our goal. Allison Ball, what can you tell us about HR 2366? So the AFU Act is HR 2366. It is a bill in the House right now, bipartisan bill, with quite a bit of support. The bill just very basically seeks to offer discretion and the opportunity for each one of these families to go before an immigration judge and plead their case without having to have this lengthy separation. Many cases, 10 years. There are other families that this is a permanent lifetime bar. So it's really just a shot at discretion to waive the inadmissibility. What else can we do to support the AFU community, Marta? Thank you so much for that question. So just like you said, number one is reaching out to your representatives. The other thing we ask is for you to uplift these stories. That is how power is built, is education. Most people, again, do not know that this issue even exists, right? We see in the movies, we see on TV when you marry a U.S. citizen, it's like a magic wand, and now you're a citizen. We need to make sure that people know that that's not the case and that there are so many citizens who are struggling, just like Amanda, and deserve a fair shake. So I would say public education is probably the best way that you can help support AFU right now, Marta.
If I can add to that too, American Families United as the organization and Ashley in her role put out some really valuable information on their social media, as well as through their emails. So one of the things that's really useful if you do sign up to get American Families United emails just to stay in the loop about things, is you will get you will be the first to know about stories. You'll get the perspectives of people who are going through the system, and there's always suggestions, ideas, opportunities for how to share that with a broader audience. We are in a moment where it's really important for U.S. citizens to speak out, and it's important for U.S. citizens and people who care about the issue to amplify this, as Ashley said, as much as possible.
Thanks, Austin. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the other piece of legislation that also includes the American Families United Act. That is the Dignity Act of 2025. It's HR 4393. Again, another really bipartisan bill with a lot of support from both Republicans and Democrats right now. One piece of information I want everyone to leave this briefing with today is that when we speak to lawmakers, um, this is not controversial to them, right? They are not uh, disputing the validity of U.S. citizens having the right to live in the country with their spouse. There just is not enough energy or attention on the issue, and that is what we seek to change, because we do believe that the majority of folks think that this is common sense. All right. I don't see any other questions popping up. So I want to thank everyone for their time today. Remind you that we will be sending out this report shortly and then in the next week or so. And please, again, like Austin said, follow along with AFU, follow us on social media, amplify the stories that we put out. Because that's how this changes. So, again, a big debt of gratitude to everyone. Amanda, Austin, Allyson, thank you all for being with us today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. Thank you.